Fish on Fridays. I'm Al McCauley, and today I want to talk to you about another Marian apparition that is going to produce a specific devotion and a sacramental. All of that in one episode. And this episode is going to kind of feature something I did in a previous episode that I'll tell you about as well. So a lot going on today. Today I want to talk to you about the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, which the church celebrates every year on July 16th. Now, Our Lady of Mount Carmel is an apparition when Mary appeared to a man we know as Saint Simon Stock, and said to him, basically, I want you to receive this habit or this thing to wear around over your neck, over your head, around your neck, to remind ourselves of Mary's patronage. We call this thing today a scapular. And that's the previous episode I've done. If you look back in the archives of Fish on Fridays, I've done an episode about the scapular, that particular sacramental that some people wear. It's very popular. And Mary gave it to St. Simon Stock on this day, July 16th, 1253, and 1251, I should say. And that's why we celebrate Our Lady of Mount Carmel on July 16th. But she gave it to him and said, I want you to receive this habit, my beloved son. I want you to receive it so whoever wears it, if they die, they will never suffer eternal fire. And so thus is born a religious order we call the Carmelites, named after Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Now let's go back even further. What's Mount Carmel? Where is Mount Carmel, you might ask? Well, it is an actual place. And in fact, I have been very fortunate enough to see it. I've been there. My wife and I were very lucky to go to Israel on a pilgrimage a few years ago. And one of the things we saw was Mount Carmel. And it's a mountain that overlooks the Mediterranean Sea. So it's on the western coast, if you will, of Israel. And it's famous in the Old Testament of our Bible, but the scene that you probably have heard of the most or are most familiar to people is what Elijah did. The prophet Elijah is going to confront the priests of a certain pagan religion called Baal. And Baal is a god, an idol, a pagan that was worshipped. And he has this very dramatic confrontation with them that God works through him and a miracle happens. I'm not going to go into that so much. I'm going to make you look that up. That's your homework. It's in 1 Kings, Old Testament, 1 Kings, chapter 18, verses 20 to 39. It's a great story. It's very dramatic. And again, Elijah confronting the priests of Baal. Anyway, Mount Carmel is recognized from that point on, and even other reasons, as a holy place. So as you can imagine, after Jesus appears, centuries later, and he does his ministry, and he lives, he dies, he rises, and ascends to heaven, it becomes a place for Christians to congregate, in particular Christian monks. And in the middle of the 13th century, Catholic monks are going to live there, and they're going to create a monastery that they're going to dedicate to Mary, to the Virgin Mary. And so it's associated from its get-go, from its origins, with Mary. And again, in 1251, in July 16th, that date again, Mary, that's when she appears to St. Simon Stock and gives him this habit or this scapular. And that is why we call them Carmelites, because it happens on Mount Carmel. And the Carmelite order is going to flourish throughout Europe. They're going to end up leaving this place because, unfortunately, a few decades after this apparition, Muslims are going to come into the region. They're going to take over the monastery. They're going to burn it and destroy it. And they're going to kill, unfortunately, many of the monks that live there. But it wasn't before the Carmelites really started, and then they spread out throughout Europe, and they flourished, and are still with us today. And just think about some of the Carmelites that we've had in our history, some really important figures like Teresa of Avila and her friend John of the Cross, both from the 16th century. My personal favorite Carmelite and personal favorite saint of all time, Teresa of Lisieux, was a Carmelite. Edith Stein. So we've had so many. Who was Saint Benedicta? Saint Edith Stein. But she died in Auschwitz, unfortunately. But we have so many great Carmelites that spring from this tradition of the Carmelite order that really was put on the map, if you will, with Simon Stock receiving this apparition and this wonderful sacramental in the middle of the 13th century. The Carmelite order became official in 1274 at the Council of Lyon in France, and like I said, has been around ever since, so going on over almost 800 years, knocking on the door 800 years. So as a feast day, this July 16th feast day, Our Lady of Mount Carmel, it's really going to first appear on the Universal Church's calendar in the 19th century, and so early part of that century. And so although it had been recognized by that order, it didn't become part of the Church's universal calendar until a few centuries later. But think about this. When you think about this story, you know, it's fun to think about the scapular, and it's a nice thing to wear. If you have one, it's a great sacramental. But I think what we need to remember is that it symbolizes the genuine power of prayer, the power of genuine prayer, really. That prayer and recommitment to one's faith is important. The idea of a monastery is important. The idea of praying to Mary as an intercessor is important. But even when that's taken away, as it was in the 13th century, it still flourishes. God always has a plan. God always has a way. And so our genuine prayer is always met with that understanding that God can make all things happen, can make all things new. He can resurrect even the dead, as he did with his son. And so the Carmelite order is going to flourish to continue to influence our faith and people around the world. So it's a good time to remind ourselves to commit ourselves to our faith. So there you go, Our Lady of Mount Carmel. There was a lot going on there, but I hope you got it all. And again, if you look in the archives, you'll see a little bit more about the scapular. I go a bit more in depth about that particular devotion. So thanks for watching. We hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to share the content, that'd be great. We'd love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook. But either way, please keep tuning in every Friday for more Fish on Fridays. Until next time, please be good to each other, and God bless.